Ghislaine is innocent of these charges. And when you are innocent and you believe yourself to be innocent, notwithstanding that there is currently a conviction, and that is the public position and the legal position, that's not her belief.
Ghislaine Maxwell is asking a federal court to set aside her conviction in 2021 on sex trafficking and other charges for which she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She said substantial new evidence has emerged, proving that she didn't get a fair trial. 9 separate grounds, including jury misconduct and government suppression of evidence, are in her petition. It's been filed without a lawyer, and Ghislaine Maxwell has so far exhausted all other appeal options. This could complicate the release of the Epstein files by the Department of Justice, which they're legally obliged to do by tomorrow. Well, in a broadcast exclusive, Ian Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's brother, joins us to discuss the new evidence that has come to light. A warm welcome, Ian. Thank you for being with us on Times Radio.
Thank you.
Your sister says that information and evidence previously unavailable to her and her attorneys has since emerged that should render her conviction invalid, unsafe and infirm. What exactly is new?
Well, there's quite a lot that's come out. I think the most important points relate to the jury. We know already at the end of the trial that there was a juror that in post-trial interviews admitted that he had been the victim of sexual abuse when he was a young boy or a young man, and he had failed to disclose that on the jury form when he was being considered for jury service on this trial. And by failing to do that, it meant that my sister's defense team were unable to strike him for cause because of that prior abuse, which would have necessarily impacted on his service in the jury. Anyway, when this came to light, it came to light in an unusual fashion, because in America, jurors can speak to the media. That doesn't happen in Britain, but it does over there. And this juror 50, Scotty David, gave interviews, including to a journalist for The Independent. And it turned out that journalist had a prior legal training, and she immediately understood the inherent conflict of interest in what he had admitted to her, namely the prior sexual abuse, and failing to declare it on the jury form. The judge, when this was brought to her attention, had no option but to summon that juror in front of her. And on the strict proviso that he told her the truth, she would give him, and did give him, immunity. As a result of that mini hearing, she concluded that he had not done it maliciously, that he was not biased, and that this did not call for a mistrial. Subsequently, the journalist concerned published a book and gave interviews. The book, I think, was published in 2024, in which it is completely evident that he lied to the judge. He did not tell her the truth, and therefore, in fact, he was completely biased. And that meant that there was only an 11-man jury. And in what he disclosed to the journalist, he also disclosed that 2 other members of the jury also had prior sexual abuse history. And therefore, Ghislaine was effectively tried by 9 and not by 12 jurors, which is the constitutional requirement. So this is a major defect that has only come out in the last 12, 14 months.
And have you approached Scotty David, the juror concerned, or indeed any of the other jurors about this?
I don't believe so, because the evidence only came out that I've just told you about, as I said, just over a year or so ago. And it finally got to Ghislaine, who, after all, is coming up to spending her 6th Christmas in jail. and having to do this on her own and assemble all her own information and so forth. It's been extremely difficult for her to do anything, and indeed for anyone to be helping her to be able to get a fair shakedown.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we should point out that Juror 50 Scotty David was not here to defend himself. We should point that out, that we've not heard his side of this. Let me talk about some other elements of this petition. Ghislaine has also accused prosecutors of working too closely with private lawyers representing some of the alleged victims. She said had financial interest in the outcome of her criminal case. Just expand on that for us. That is another element.
Well, the total amount of money that has been paid to accusers and to their lawyers is getting on for $750 million. It is a gigantic sum of money that has been taken from the Epstein estate, two banks, Morgan Stanley, I believe, and Deutsche Bank, Prince Andrew, my sister, whatever. Huge amount of money has been paid. The lawyers inevitably have been receiving something like, whatever, 50% or 40% or 20%, an enormous amount of money. There is a direct financial interest of these lawyers, and obviously of the accused, but of the lawyers, to drive funds towards themselves. And the reality is that we now know, and we know it from reporting of Julie Brown in the Miami Herald that really brought the whole Epstein story to life. We know it from countless films and documentaries that have been made where the lawyers have played big parts and bigged themselves up as having been central to the prosecution, to the provision of evidence, to the selection.
But does that mean that victims were not telling the truth? I know victims were very upset with what was cast at them during Ghislaine's trial. They were very upset that she spoke to Todd Blanche, part of the Trump administration, afterwards as well. Doesn't this effectively say, well, they were being made to have their day in court because someone was financially interested in getting enough money from them? Isn't it just enough for them to want to have their day in court to put forward their testimony, to try and highlight some wrongdoing here?
I'm completely sympathetic to people wanting to put the case forward and to put that to an independent jury in a court setting. Of course, that's what justice is all about. But it's a two-way street. And if you have a situation where the evidence of these accusers, and there were 4 of them at my sister's trial, where crucial evidence, their diaries, their MySpace accounts, and other evidence that was hidden from Ghislaine could not be brought, which the government is obliged to share with the defense because it was hidden. The reality
Why did they hide it? Sorry, Ian, just to kind of help our listeners understand this. Why was this evidence hidden?
Because it was unhelpful to the government's case. And therefore, it calls into credibility, it calls into question the credibility of the witnesses, both as to their age and where they allege the abuse took place, when it was supposed to have taken place, and how it was supposed to have taken place. If you hide this evidence because it doesn't suit your narrative, then you are effectively cutting off the legs of the defense.
Yeah.
How do you know what you are doing?
Yeah. How do you know that it was hidden? That is the next sort of natural question, I think, to ask.
I'll tell you exactly how we know. Because Governor Ron DeSantis, who is the governor of Florida, released in December 2024 the grand jury transcripts of the first Epstein indictment. And in that indictment, we discovered that a crucial witness for the government, namely the so-called scene of crime manager at Epstein's house, who took possession of a massage table, which was alleged at my sister's trial in 2021, to have been the massage table on which the abuse against one of the victims had taken place. It turns out that the evidence he gave in the 2006 indictment of Epstein was different to the evidence he gave at the 21 trial of my sister. Now, the government knew about the 2006 grand jury transcripts, and yet they did not make them available. And they did not tell us that there was a difference in the testimony. And what does that show? It shows that the massage table that was alleged to have been used, and which we know from Juror 50's post-trial transcript, was crucial to the jury to make a conviction on 2 of the counts, was not actually the same table that he had laid his hands on in 2006. And even though it sounds ridiculous, the fact is that that table was the only evidence that the government had to demonstrate what's known as interstate commerce. And how did they show that? Because there was a sign on it that said "Made in California." I mean, you know, it's on that kind of thing that a trial will turn.
Yeah. Okay. Look, why has Ghislaine done this without the help of a lawyer?
Sorry, say that again.
Why has Ghislaine done this without the help of a lawyer?
Quite simply because she's run out of money. Lawyers are very, very expensive, and there's no more money.
And is that because she's had multiple appeals rejected so far? I think people might again find it hard to understand that Ghislaine Maxwell, you know, someone from an affluent family, from an affluent background, with some serious connections over the years, is now completely broke.
Well, I don't think it should come as a surprise at all. This has been going for 6 years. She was arrested in July 2020. We are today, December 2025. It's incredible. And each of the appeals that you have referenced were, for example, the Supreme Court appeal was on a different, set on a different basis. And the appeal to the New York appeal court prior to the Supreme Court did not have a lot of the evidence, in fact, most of the evidence that is now being put forward in this habeas petition. And the simple fact is that you cannot continue to fire money into lawyers' hands if you haven't got it. So Ghislaine, there's no one better to know Ghislaine's case than Ghislaine, and she has put it together herself.
And when was the last time you spoke to Ghislaine? What did she say?
Gosh, I think that would have been about 4 or 5 months ago, I guess. At the time of you referenced a conversation she had with Todd Blanche. I think it would have been around that time that I spoke to her. I think she certainly sounded to me hopeful that things would get better for her. And I mean, as far as her conditions in prison, they are clearly better than they were. And so she's in a better place.
Was that as a result of speaking to Todd Blanche, do you think, the Deputy Attorney General?
I wasn't a fly on the wall. However, what I can tell you is that her life was in danger at Tallahassee. It was a very, very dangerous place. I think there was a perception that if she was talking to the government, that she must have been snitching on that sort of thing, and fellow prisoners don't like it. Life is cheap in these places. She was in a dangerous place, and the government could not afford, having lost Jeffrey Epstein on their watch, to lose Ghislaine Maxwell in their custody. So I don't think this is some sweetheart deal done because Ghislaine said this and then so on. I think that's some nonsense. I think her life was in danger. She was moved to a safer place. She's in a safer place, and that's entirely correct.
There are reports that suggest she's been given preferential treatment. So not just that she's in a much more relaxed prison, a low-security prison in Texas, but that she gets time with a puppy, custom-made meals, personal training. Is any of that true?
I don't know. I personally, I have no knowledge of any of that at all. Ghislaine's never referenced, told me about any puppy and that sort of stuff. I know that that's apparently available, but you have to realize that everything to do with Ghislaine is has got a price, in the sense that if you can leak emails or leak news or take pictures, somebody's making money somewhere. So Ghislaine's a meal ticket for a lot of people. We don't know anything about the veracity of the evidence that's been given. We know when it was released entirely inappropriately by Congress, that they crowed about it. Basically, the Democrats on the Congressional Committee is using Ghislaine to beat President Trump with. It's just as clear as a bell to me.
Do you think that Donald Trump has a case to answer, that there is anything on Donald Trump in those Epstein files which are mandated to be released by the Department of Justice tomorrow?
I'd be enormously surprised if there was anything remotely untoward regarding the president. Don't forget that between the two terms of Trump were 4 years of Joe Biden. You don't think the Democrats didn't comb through all those papers to find something they could have locked him up with? Nothing came out. Nothing has come out at all.
Mm-hmm. But could those files, as I said, they are due to come out tomorrow. Do you think that there'll be a delay in release? There is the question of whether this petition from Ghislaine will be enough for the Department of Justice to delay release, or that in fact, actually, Ian, they could help her further, or they could hinder her further in her case for her conviction to be overturned.
I'd be very surprised if there was any delay. The release of those papers has been mandated by Congress and signed into law by President Trump. So I think that it's highly unlikely that my sister's petition, which happened to have been filed yesterday, it could have been filed any time in the last 10 days, but it ended up going on to the court docket overnight. It's possible that one or two documents or a number of documents could be held back as a function of this petition. But I think if that is the case, I think it would be a very small number and really to be essentially of no consequence at all.
Yeah. And you'd have a right, or you should have a right, to know what those documents are if they are withheld, if they interrupt the course of justice.
I think the government is obliged under this law, if I remember it right, to, if they are holding back documents, they have to say why they're holding them back and for what purpose. It could be because names have to be redacted, victims' names and such like, or it could be because there's a live case against somebody that we don't know, and they might be being held back for that reason. But the government has to give some reason why it's holding back anything, is my understanding. And yeah. I don't think this, I think the petition is the petition. The Epstein files release is the Epstein files release. And I don't think there's too much that's going to conflict between those two
crossover
matters.
What is Ghislaine's state of mind? I suppose I'm asking how she's doing.
Look, Ghislaine is innocent of these charges. And when you are innocent and you believe yourself to be innocent, notwithstanding that there is currently a conviction, and that is the public position and the legal position, that's not her belief. And when you believe that you have been wrong, you're very, very strong in your heart and in your mind. She has, the world divides into two kinds of people. It's an old aphorism between hedgehogs and foxes. The fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows one big thing. Ghislaine is a hedgehog right now. All she knows about is her case. That's all she cares about, is getting the truth into the public domain so that third parties, investigative journalists, ultimately the judge who's got to take the decision on this, is informed of what the US government decided to do deliberately, to hide information, to suppress information, and to queer the pitch in such a way that she could not defend herself. And this is on top of a grotesque and inhumane 18 months that she was kept in solitary confinement in MDC Brooklyn, the worst possible prison in the United States, woken up every 15 minutes, allegedly because she was a suicide risk. And we now know that this was specifically chosen as the treatment to be issued to her by Attorney General William Barr when he gave evidence in September 2025 to the US Congress. Now, it is incredible that this girl has had to suffer all of this and have her defense smashed before she's at trial. It's horrible. And, I'm really appalled. And I believe strongly that this petition deserves a very serious hearing. It is not run of the mill. It is not box ticking. It's someone's life out there.
Yeah. And look, people are going to say she was convicted of sex trafficking, conspiracy, sex trafficking a minor. Other counts, prosecutors accused her of grooming a 14-year-old girl to engage with sexual acts with Jeffrey Epstein and then later paying her. They are very serious charges indeed. And I suppose the question many people will have is it right to drag up the testimony of these victims all over again? Does Ghislaine really deserve a second chance on all of these matters? If she gets off on a technicality, is that then absolving her of all crimes by way of a technicality, I suppose, and that she hasn't suffered appropriately jail time for what it was decided in a court of law she did. Forget about the technicality, but obviously she's been convicted of several charges.
I've got it. Let's just deal with the 14-year-old girl. Part of the new evidence is that the mother of that girl, on oath, has attested to the fact that that her daughter was suborned by accusers' lawyers for money to give the evidence that she gave in trial. Number one. Number two, if you regard a 9-man jury instead of a constitutionally approved 12-man jury as a technicality, that's your case. But I don't think that's a technicality. I don't think that the government suppressing crucial defense documentation, or at least documentation that the defense had a right to receive, is not a technicality. It is a constitutional violation of Ghislaine's rights to a fair trial. I am not saying that had she had a fair trial and had it gone down correct and had the result that we now know taken place, that's fine. I can live with that. And she could have lived with that.
So if everything was fair and above board, you can actually live with the convictions for which she's serving time. But your point is actually there are, whether it's the withholding of evidence, whether it is an insufficient number of jurors, etc., all that we've spoken about today, that you cannot deal with. What are you looking for here, Ian? What is Ghislaine looking for? A retrial, a sentence reduction, or for her conviction to be set aside, cleared and free to walk?
I mean, I mean, all of those. The judge has the power to set the sentence aside and finish. He has the power to declare a mistrial and order a retrial. Personally, I don't think that's likely, a retrial. Too many people have died. 2 of the witnesses have died. Epstein is dead. The events are now 30 years in the past. Ghislaine will have served 6 years. You don't think that's a pretty tough sentence for a 63-year-old already? I don't think if this had taken place in England, I think the maximum she might have had is 5 years. Maximum. I mean, this is a grotesque system we're dealing with. The United States justice system is anything but a justice system. It is grotesque.
To that point, I must ask you about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and whether the King was right to strip him of all his titles over this affair.
Gosh, that's a completely different tack. Look, I think the prince has suffered mightily for his errors in judgment, and certainly for his terrible mistakes that he made with his various strategies, media strategy, and so on. I don't think a greater fall in public esteem I can think of in my lifetime. So I consider that he has
but was it
truly
an error
suffered.
of judgment, or is there criminality there? The accusation, of course, that he engaged in sex with a minor, through Jeffrey Epstein's operation.
Well, the only minor, in inverted commas, that I think you're referring to is Virginia Giuffre, who of course has died since, and we know that her testimony is deeply, deeply problematic. So problematic, in fact, that the prosecution chose not to use her evidence at my sister's trial, even though she's the best known and the most vociferous. And why did they do that? Because she has been proven on many occasions, not the least against Professor Alan Dershowitz, when she had to back down and said she was wrong, to have told basically untruths. And although she clearly has suffered, there's no doubt that
she was paid a very large amount of money. So look, yes, of course, Andrew denies all allegations. It's never been tested in a court of law, but she was paid a very large amount of money. And, sadly, she has taken her own life over this affair, over people accusing her of not telling the truth, of not feeling heard. I mean, that is incredibly serious.
Well, I mean, obviously she's no longer here. So, but I mean, I think there were several, for what we know, there were many complicating factors in her life. She had a very complicated life. There's no doubt about it. And what happened to her is sad, very sad, and for her family especially. But you cannot get away from the fact that the words that she used and the untruths that she told, and which have been proven, have destroyed lives, including Prince Andrew's. So I'm not here to you
don't think Andrew did that to himself?
He certainly was most unhelpful to himself and shot himself in the foot several times.